Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into one of the most secretive corners of Chinese imperial history, the hidden corridors of desire. Picture it. The air thick with incense. A silence so heavy it almost hums. And corridors stretching endlessly beneath lanterns that never seem to die out. You can almost feel the warmth of candlelight on the walls. See the faint shimmer of gold embroidery as figures glide past you like spirits. And somewhere in the distance, soft laughter. Quickly stifled. Welcome to the Emperor's forbidden world. You'd probably last 5 minutes here before fainting, not because of fear, but because the rules alone could give you a headache. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the Forbidden City, though the forbidden part feels less like a warning and more like an invitation. The marble floors are cold beneath your bare feet, and every step echoes with the weight of centuries. It's the Tang dynasty, or maybe the Ming. History tends to blur the lines when it comes to pleasure. The empire is vast, the emperor divine, and his desires, well, those are an entirely different kingdom of their own. The courtyards are silent now, but you can imagine the footsteps of eunuchs hurrying through the moonlight, carrying scrolls, perfumes, and small boxes carved from sandalwood. Inside those boxes, not jewels, not food, but something far stranger, powders and elixirs prepared by the imperial alchemists, believed to balance the inner cosmos. The emperor, you see, was not just a ruler of men but also, supposedly, a conductor of cosmic energy. His vitality was thought to influence the stability of the realm itself. A weak emperor meant weak harvests, unrest, and perhaps even invasion. So, to ensure the empire's safety, palace scholars and physicians dedicated themselves to keeping His Majesty energetically balanced. Imagine your HR department taking charge of your romantic life. It's about that level of weird. You pause before a pair of golden doors carved with dragons chasing pearls, a symbol of the eternal dance between yin and yang. Behind them lies the emperor's private quarters. The air is warm, perfumed with a blend of sandalwood and something faintly metallic, mercury. Perhaps, many emperors believed that consuming small doses of mercury or gold dust could prolong life. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But the belief was too strong to die quickly. You take another cautious step. Every inch of the room screams controlled perfection. Jade figurines lined in symmetrical rows. Silk cushions arranged in precise pairs. Each one embroidered with phoenixes and cranes. Even desire had geometry here. Nothing spontaneous, nothing raw, everything orchestrated like a ceremony. From the far side of the chamber, a faint rustle breaks the silence. A shadow moves, slow, deliberate, graceful. It's one of the chosen concubines. Her face hidden behind a veil of golden threads. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her presence alone carries centuries of training, discipline, and expectation. She is not merely a woman. She's a symbol of beauty, obedience, and fertility. The eunuchs outside murmur, counting the time, recording the ritual, Everything is documented: the date, the hour, the alignment of stars, even the emperor's mood. Because here, intimacy isn't personal, it's political. A single night could determine alliances, heirs, or even the balance of power among court factions. You can't help but feel a chill. Not from the night air, but from the realization that this world runs on calculation, not passion. The emperor, surrounded by luxury beyond imagination, is the loneliest man alive. He owns everything except privacy. And yet, within these suffocating walls, strange tenderness sometimes bloomed. There were stories, whispered by eunuchs after midnight, of emperors who fell deeply in love with a single concubine, defying the cosmic rotation of privilege. Those tales, however, rarely ended well. Love was not part of the imperial system. It disrupted the celestial balance. It threatened bureaucracy. It was, in short, bad governance. You reach out, tracing the edge of a silk curtain. It's embroidered with cranes flying toward a sun that never sets, a reminder of eternal duty. The threadwork is so fine it almost seems alive. And for a fleeting second, you can feel the pulse of history beneath your fingertips. Outside, the night deepens. A full moon hangs over the palace rooftops. Pale and unblinking, the emperor will soon rise from his meditation to perform his nightly rituals. Somewhere, eunuchs are preparing the chamber, adjusting the lamps, laying out robes, whispering about omens. You catch a fragment of their gossip. One of them swears the emperor's dreams have been haunted lately by women with foxtails. Another claims the imperial astrologer warned that Venus was too bright this week, meaning the balance between yin and yang might tip toward disaster. You'd think managing an empire was stressful enough without worrying about astral romance. Still, the emperor must follow the ritual. A missed night could be interpreted as a sign of weakness. An empire's fate hanging on one man's bedtime schedule, it's almost poetic. You wander past an altar where a candle burns steadily beside a jade bowl filled with clear water. The reflection trembles as your breath brushes across it. Somewhere, a gong sounds softly, the signal that preparations are complete. The emperor will be escorted soon. You wonder if he feels excitement, or dread, or nothing at all. For him, pleasure has long since turned into performance. The courtiers call it grace. The astrologers call it harmony. But beneath all the layers of ritual, there's just one lonely human being trying to convince himself he's divine. You glance back toward the corridor, and for a brief moment, the golden lamps flicker. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe it's the sigh of history itself, brushing past you. The silence that follows feels almost sacred. You exhale slowly, letting the weight of the palace settle into your chest, heavy, fragrant, timeless. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice reminds you, every dynasty builds its walls not just to keep others out, but to keep its own secrets in. You take one last look at the shadowed hall, where silk whispers, where time itself seems to hold its breath, and you realize, this is only the beginning. The corridors stretch farther ahead, and each door hides a story more peculiar than the last. You keep walking. The corridor curves gently, lined with lanterns whose light quivers like breathing. Each step draws you closer to the emperor's private chamber, the heart of his midnight routine. If history had a heartbeat, It would sound like this: the shuffle of silk, the murmur of eunuchs, the sigh of someone too powerful to sleep. It's almost midnight. Outside, the city sleeps beneath a veil of mist. But inside the forbidden city, time behaves differently. Here, the day never truly ends, it simply changes color. The emperor's chamber becomes a stage. And every night, the same ritual begins again. You can imagine it. Eunuchs standing in silent rows, their heads bowed, holding lamps that flicker like nervous thoughts. They're the keepers of the schedule, the men who decide when, where, and even if the emperor sleeps. Their duty isn't to comfort him, but to preserve his image as the living embodiment of heaven's order. The strange part? The emperor himself rarely chooses his partner for the night. That choice belongs to the Bureau of Eunuchs, who follow a rotation as strict as the phases of the moon. Somewhere, deep within the administrative maze, a clerk is cross-checking lists, star charts, and birth dates to determine which concubine will share the imperial pillow tonight. You can't help but smirk. Imagine the most awkward group project ever, and the final grade determines world peace. A eunuch clears his throat, signaling the start of the inspection, a process so odd it borders on surreal. Two attendants step forward, each holding a silk robe embroidered with dragons. They bow, not to the emperor, he's still meditating, but to the bed itself. Then, one eunuch checks the temperature of the mattress, while another ensures the incense burns evenly. It's not passion, it's logistics. Finally, the emperor stands. He moves slowly, deliberately, as though afraid that even breathing too fast might disrupt the cosmic balance. His face is unreadable, part serenity, part exhaustion. He's been ruling since dawn, petitions, ceremonies, decisions that could change lives. But now, he must fulfill a duty far stranger than any decree, to keep the empire's life force flowing. One night at a time. You notice the eunuch adjusting a low stool beside the bed. That stool, believe it or not, has a name: the verification seat. It's where the chosen concubine will sit before being carried to the emperor. Not walk, carried. She's not supposed to touch the floor, for fear of losing energy meant for the Son of Heaven. So here's how it goes. She bathes in perfumed water, changes into a light robe scented with orchid, and is then wrapped in a quilt like a human parcel. Two eunuchs lift her carefully, arms trembling, and deliver her to the emperor's bed as if offering a relic to a god. You take a deep breath. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and rose. There's beauty in it, but also a kind of eerie sadness, like watching a puppet show where no one remembers who's pulling the strings. The emperor sits silently, his gaze distant. The concubine kneels beside the bed, head bowed, waiting for his signal. A bell chimes, once, twice, marking the auspicious hour. The eunuchs retreat, bowing low, closing the doors behind them. And then, silence. But this silence isn't romantic. It's ceremonial. You can almost hear the weight of expectation pressing down on both of them. The emperor's every gesture, every breath, is bound by unseen laws. Even pleasure here is a matter of statecraft. According to imperial custom, the act must be brief, efficient, almost ritualistic. Some chronicles mention time limits measured by candle length or the number of incense breaths. Others claim that the emperor would meditate afterward to reclaim the scattered essence. Its intimacy redesigned by bureaucracy. And yet, for all its strangeness, there's something hauntingly human beneath it. Maybe the emperor wonders, as you do now, if any of this still belongs to him, his choices, his body, his desire, or if he's just another piece of machinery in a divine mechanism that never stops turning. You glance toward the screen doors. The eunuchs outside are listening. Not for pleasure, but for duty. They record the time. They'll note when the emperor finishes, when the lights dim, and when the next concubine's name should be moved one place forward on the register. The imperial record must remain accurate. Heaven demands documentation. Some historians still debate whether these routines were truly followed or merely exaggerated by later writers to emphasize decadence. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between, half history, half theater. After all, the Forbidden City was built on both. You shift your weight and hear a soft creak from the wooden floor. The sound seems to echo forever. Bouncing off centuries, you imagine the same creak being heard by different emperors, men who lived, loved, and ruled from within the same golden cage. In one corner, a small jade bowl glimmers under the candlelight. It holds a mixture of crushed pearls and deer musk, believed to enhance spiritual union. You grimace slightly. Humans have always chased immortality. Emperors just had bigger budgets. As the ritual ends, the eunuchs return, silent as ghosts. The concubine is lifted once again and carried away. The emperor lies still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling carved with constellations. To the world, he's the son of heaven. But in this moment, he's just a man trying to find rest between duty and desire. You can almost hear his thoughts. If the stars decide everything, what's left for me to decide? The incense burns lower. The light softens. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls for dawn. Another night recorded. Another act completed. Another page written in the secret book of the empire's desires. And as you leave the chamber, stepping back into the cool hallway, you realize something. Power, no matter how absolute, can't buy freedom, especially not from your own rituals. The corridor ahead seems endless again, stretching into shadow and silence. You keep walking, hearing only the faint hum of wind against the palace walls. Somewhere, another door waits to open, and behind it, stranger secrets still. The air cools as you follow the narrow passage toward another chamber, this one smaller, quieter, almost domestic. The emperor's footsteps don't echo here. They melt into the carpeted floor. You find yourself in the selection room, where the knight's partner is chosen. But don't imagine rose petals and whispered confessions. No, this selection is more astrology than affection, more mathematics than emotion. Here, love is scheduled. A group of court officials sits around a low table covered in scrolls, jade tokens, and silk ribbons, each representing a different concubine. You watch as an elderly eunuch, his face creased like old parchment, adjusts his spectacles and consults a calendar filled with red circles and cryptic symbols. He hums softly, tracing lines between constellations and names. He's not matchmaking, he's calculating cosmic compatibility. According to Imperial belief, harmony between yin, female, and yang, male, energies had to align with the heavens. A single misstep, the wrong birth hour, the wrong moon phase, could disrupt the balance of the empire. And if a drought or rebellion followed, the blame fell squarely on the bedroom. Imagine having your entire country's fate depend on your horoscope. You can't help but chuckle quietly. Sorry, heaven, Mars was in retrograde. One of the officials mutters. The emperor's fire element is strong tonight. We must temper it with water. Another nods gravely and picks a token tied with a blue ribbon, representing a concubine born under the sign of the black tortoise. Guardian of the northern seas. He places the ribbon in a golden bowl. Decision made. The empire breathes again. A eunuch records the choice on a bamboo slip with meticulous care. Date, time, name, and even weather conditions. He blows gently on the ink to dry it, as if sealing fate itself. Somewhere else in the palace, the chosen concubine will soon receive the message. She won't jump for joy, she'll start preparing. The process is exhausting, even frightening. Baths scented with petals, hair arranged precisely according to the 5 elements chart. Perfume chosen not for preference, but for astrological alignment. And always silence. She must not speak unless spoken to. Tonight, she is not a person, she is balance incarnate. Meanwhile, you study the astrologers' faces. None of them seem particularly excited about their job. They're not matchmakers of romance but bureaucrats of destiny. To them, this is paperwork with incense. And yet, there's reverence in their precision. They believe every act, no matter how private, connects to the rhythm of the cosmos. You lean closer, reading one of the scrolls. It lists pairings from past nights. 4th month, 8th day, rainy. Yin hour, partner, Lady May. Result, favorable dreams. Another entry. 6th month, 2nd day, windy. Fire hour, partner, Lady Yun. Result, minor unease. You raise an eyebrow. History's strangest performance reviews. But behind the absurdity lies fear. Emperors were not just men, they were symbols. If they faltered, if pleasure turned to illness or fatigue, whispers began. Ministers speculated. Priests performed cleansing rites. The throne depended not only on armies and decrees, but on stamina. You imagine the pressure to satisfy not just desire, but divinity. A gong sounds faintly in the distance. The astrologers bow and roll up the scrolls. Their decision is final, for tonight. At least, tomorrow, the stars might demand something else entirely. You step back as they leave the room. The scent of ink and candle wax lingering like a ghost. The golden bowl sits alone now. The blue ribbon glowing faintly in the lamplight. You can't help but wonder about the woman it represents. Is she relieved, terrified, or simply resigned? Outside, you pass through a garden filled with plum trees. The petals glisten with dew. Silver under the moon, somewhere beyond the wall. Faint music drifts from a distant courtyard, flutes and zithers. Delicate and slow, the palace is alive, yet it feels strangely hollow. You pause by a pond. The surface reflects the moon perfectly, unbroken, flawless. But when a fish rises to the surface, the reflection shatters. Maybe that's what life here is. Endless attempts to keep the surface still. Even as everything below thrashes and gasps for air. A soft voice interrupts your thoughts, a young eunuch. Barely 16, he bows awkwardly, holding a folded silk cloth. The concubine has accepted the decree. He says. His tone is formal, but his eyes betray pity. You thank him with a nod. Though he doesn't meet your gaze. He turns and disappears into the shadows, swallowed by the machinery of duty. You stand alone again. The stars above look distant, indifferent. You think of the astrologer's quiet confidence, how they map human passion onto the heavens, turning longing into geometry. And you realize something. In this world, even love must obey mathematics. You walk onward, your footsteps echoing softly against the stone. Somewhere ahead, the emperor waits in his candlelit room, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to care, how many hands shaped the destiny of his next heartbeat. You can almost feel the weight of it, that strange mixture of desire and duty, fate and fear. And as you leave the selection room behind, you can't help but whisper into the dark. Maybe the stars never cared at all. The night deepens, and the palace seems to inhale with you, along. Slow breath that fills every corridor with the scent of sandalwood and ancient ink. You follow a narrow hallway leading toward a small, heavily guarded chamber. 2 bronze doors stand ahead, engraved with coiling dragons and clouds. Behind them lies one of the most secretive artifacts of the imperial court, the Golden Register. You've heard whispers about it, a document both revered and feared. Every name, every night, every moment of imperial intimacy is recorded inside. It's the diary of power disguised as ritual, a bureaucratic map of the emperor's private life. When the doors creak open, a faint glow spills out. Inside, the chamber smells of beeswax and paper, a sacred mixture of time and secrecy. You see rows of shelves stacked with scrolls bound in yellow silk. A single eunuch kneels at a table in the center, writing with a brush so delicate it barely seems to touch the page. His movements are slow, reverent, like a priest recording prayers. You step closer. The paper before him is marked with neat, looping characters. Each line begins with a date, followed by a name, and then, astonishingly, a brief notation describing the emperor's favor. Some are simple: auspicious union, good harmony. Others are oddly specific: 2 incense lengths, moderate energy, balanced breathing. You can't help but grin. Imagine your private life written in the world's most judgmental spreadsheet. The eunuch notices your expression and whispers. Every night must be accounted for. His Majesty's virtue is the virtue of the realm. His voice trembles slightly, as if even the air might carry his words too far. You nod slowly, watching him seal a scroll with wax stamped in the shape of a phoenix. It's then that you realize, this isn't just record-keeping. It's surveillance, a ritual meant to assure everyone that the emperor's vitality remains unbroken, his cosmic balance intact. There's a story the eunuchs still tell, of one emperor who broke tradition and failed to register his night. The next morning, rumors spread through the palace like wildfire. Had the Son of Heaven fallen ill? Had heaven withdrawn its favor? By sundown, the empire's astrologers were already performing purification rites. 3 days later, the emperor corrected the record, inventing a night that never happened. And just like that, history rewrote itself. You walk between the shelves, feeling the quiet pulse of centuries. Each scroll represents a night that once mattered, a heartbeat preserved in ink. Some scrolls are so old their silk bindings have faded to pale ivory. Others are crisp and new, smelling faintly of cinnamon, the scent used to ward off decay. It's strange, isn't it? Desire, the most human of things, transformed into paperwork. Yet for the court, this register wasn't scandalous, it was sacred. It proved the emperor's divine endurance, his balance between heaven and earth. Without these records, the illusion of perfection would crumble. You pause by a shelf labeled Reign of the Radiant Dragon Emperor. The titles sound majestic, but the entries are surprisingly mundane. 5th month, 9th day, chosen, Lady Lin. Favorable energy, mild fatigue afterward. 7th month, 1st day, Lady Shu. Excessive fire element, recommend abstinence tomorrow. 10th month, 13th day, no selection. Emperor meditated instead, palace anxious. You shake your head. Bureaucracy never sleeps, not even between silk sheets. The eunuch returns with a small golden brush rest shaped like a tiger. The ink must always flow east to west. He murmurs, to follow the path of the sun. You realize that even the direction of writing carries cosmic significance. Every stroke is both sensual and celestial. Each line an act of devotion. But devotion to what? The emperor? The gods? Or the myth that the two are the same? Outside, you hear faint footsteps, another scribe arriving with fresh reports. He bows, presents a sealed envelope, and retreats without a word. The eunuch breaks the seal and scans the parchment. His eyes flicker with emotion, surprise, maybe fear. Then he hides the scroll inside a drawer and locks it quickly. You ask what it was, but he only shakes his head. A correction, he whispers. They happen sometimes. You don't need more explanation. Somewhere, someone in this palace has been erased or replaced. Maybe a concubine fell ill. Or worse, fell out of favor. In the imperial system, being forgotten was often a gentler punishment than being remembered. You feel a chill run down your spine. The air seems thicker now. The candles burning lower. The shadows dance along the shelves, curling like ink in water. You reach out and touch one of the scrolls. The silk feels warm, almost alive. For a brief moment, you imagine the whispers trapped inside, voices of women long gone, of nights that once seemed eternal but now fit into a single line of history. And you wonder how many truths have been lost beneath these neat, controlled letters. The eunuch bows again, signaling that you must leave. The register sleeps when His Majesty sleeps. He says softly. You step out, and the heavy doors close behind you with a muffled thud. The sound echoes through the corridor, sealing centuries of secrets once more. As you walk away, the air feels cooler, thinner. You catch your reflection in a bronze mirror, your face pale. Eyes wide, as if you've glimpsed something sacred and forbidden. And perhaps you have. For behind every golden record, beneath every careful line of ink, lies the truth no empire dares to write. That even gods of men are ruled by their own loneliness. You pause at the end of the hall. Somewhere far away, a bell tolls softly, the sound trembling like the heartbeat of the forbidden city itself. And you realize, in this place, even silence is recorded. You leave the chamber of the golden register behind. But its scent, that strange mixture of beeswax, ink, and secrecy, clings to your memory like smoke. The further you walk, the quieter the palace becomes. Every sound seems swallowed by distance, the shuffle of your steps, the sigh of a curtain, even the faint flutter of bats beneath the eaves. Then you hear it, whispers. Not the soft gossip of maids, but something subtler, sharper, the kind of murmur that bends around corners. You follow the sound until you find its source, a narrow doorway half hidden behind a painted screen. The characters above the lintel-red hall of inner service. Inside, shadows move like fish beneath rippling light. You step through, and there they are. The eunuchs. Not the stiff, ceremonial figures you saw before, but the real ones, the whisperers, the watchers, the invisible veins of the imperial body. Without them, the palace wouldn't breathe. They are everywhere and nowhere, carrying secrets in their eyes and silence in their mouths. You stand quietly and listen. One of them is recounting a story to another, about how last night's concubine refused to meet the emperor's gaze, claiming the moonlight made her dizzy. The others snicker softly, though their laughter never grows loud enough to echo. Even humor here must bow. Their clothes are simple, their heads shaved smooth, yet you can't help but notice the faint glimmer of intelligence, the kind that comes from observing too much and speaking too little. The eunuchs are more than servants, they're the empire's nervous system. They touch every message, hear every confession, and know every weakness. You've read somewhere that many of them were chosen as children, cut from the world of man to serve its most powerful. Some volunteered, believing service might buy security or prestige. Others were not given the choice. But all of them, over years of quiet labor, learned the art of invisibility. And invisibility, in a palace like this, is power. You watch one eunuch adjust the incense burner near a silk curtain. His movements are graceful, almost musical, like someone who's memorized a dance too dangerous to forget. When he glances up, his eyes meet yours briefly, calm, unblinking. There's a wisdom there that feels older than the emperor himself. He gestures for you to follow. You do. He leads you down another hallway, dimly lit, until you reach a side chamber filled with scrolls, small boxes, and ceramic jars labeled in neat calligraphy. The air hums faintly with the perfume of herbs, ginseng, lotus, musk. This, he says quietly, is where His Majesty's energy is preserved. He opens one of the boxes. Inside are tiny silver needles, coiled like serpents. Acupuncture, he explains, to guide the flow of essence. Another box holds thin silk cords and jade stones carved into crescent shapes, used in breathing rituals, he adds. His tone is matter of fact, as though discussing weather patterns, not the emperor's most intimate mysteries. You pick up one of the jade pieces. It's cool, smooth, and unexpectedly heavy. The eunuch watches you and smiles faintly. We are not just caretakers, he says. We are interpreters. The emperor's health, his spirit, his harmony, we translate them for the world. You nod, realizing he's right. The eunuchs are translators between the sacred and the human, between what is said and what is meant. He pauses, then adds softly, sometimes we whisper to protect him, sometimes to guide him, sometimes to survive him. There's a moment of silence. Then he chuckles under his breath. And sometimes, he says, we whisper because no one else can listen. You can't help but smile at the honesty in his voice. For all the ritual and obedience, there's still humor here, brittle, secret, alive. As you turn to leave, you notice a parchment pinned near the doorway. It's a map, not of the empire, but of the palace's inner chambers. Each corridor marked in red ink, each name replaced with symbols. For security, the eunuch says, no one but us knows the full layout. You study the network of lines, realizing that the eunuch's world runs parallel to the emperor's. While he rules in daylight, they rule in shadow. Every whisper, every breath, every rumor flows through them before it ever reaches the throne. It's a kingdom of secrets, and they are its quiet kings. Outside, a night breeze stirs the curtains. The faint scent of camellia drifts in, the perfume used only for the emperor's quarters. You follow the trail back toward the main hall, the eunuch's words echoing in your mind. Sometimes we whisper because no one else can listen. You picture the emperor again, alone beneath the painted ceiling of dragons and clouds, surrounded by people yet untouched by understanding. Maybe the eunuchs, in their quiet way, are his last connection to the human world. Before you leave, you glance back once more. The eunuch is still there, adjusting the candles, murmuring something you can't quite catch. It might be a prayer, or it might be another secret, folded softly into the air. You step into the corridor, the golden light fading behind you. The whispers linger, faint but steady, like the heartbeat of a palace that never sleeps. And somewhere, deep within those whispers, you sense the truth no record dares to write. Even in the empire of desire, the loudest power belongs to those who speak the least. You keep walking, deeper into the maze of hallways until the marble under your feet grows cold again. The air changes here, thicker, tinged with something metallic and sweet. A faint glow seeps from under a half-closed door ahead, flickering like the breath of a candle struggling for air. When you push it open, the scent hits you first, crushed herbs, burnt honey, and something faintly feral. You've entered the alchemist's quarters, where the emperor's secret potions were born. Rows of bronze cauldrons bubble softly, tended by men with ink-blackened fingers and eyes half-mad from study. They bow briefly, but their focus never leaves the shimmering liquids. Shelves line the walls, stacked with jars labeled in delicate brushstrokes: deer antler, rhino horn, pearl dust, toad bile. You almost gag when you see one marked human placenta, dried. Apparently, immortality had an ingredients list. At the center of the room stands an elderly alchemist. His robe faded to the color of old parchment. He stirs a pot of molten gold with a rod of jade, whispering an incantation under his breath. When he finally looks up, his pupils reflect the firelight like two coins. "You come seeking the secret of balance?" he asks softly. You hesitate. Something like that. He smiles, an expression equal parts warmth and warning. Then know this. Every emperor believes he can outwit time. But time is the only emperor who never sleeps. He gestures for you to come closer. Inside the cauldron, the golden liquid swirls like sunlight trapped underwater. He dips a thin spoon into it and lets a single drop fall onto a porcelain plate. The droplet hardens instantly into a pearl-like bead, elixir of vital essence, he says proudly, to fortify the spirit and prolong the royal flame. You've read about these concoctions before, mixtures of mercury, arsenic, and gold powder. They were supposed to restore vigor, sharpen the senses, and ensure eternal youth. In reality, they offered something else: slow, glittering poison. Still, emperors drank them, convinced that pain meant progress. You watch as the alchemist ladles the glowing liquid into a small jade vial. Each dose must be measured with reverence. He explains, too little, and heaven's fire fades; too much, and it consumes the vessel. He smiles again, as if the line between medicine and madness were merely an academic curiosity. On a nearby table, you notice another set of instruments, smaller, more delicate: silver funnels, tiny crystal cups, silk filters. The alchemist catches your gaze and nods approvingly. "Ah, those are for the intimate tonics," he says, "mixtures brewed only on nights of celestial alignment." He picks up a scroll and unrolls it halfway. The diagrams look almost obscene. Human figures outlined in red and blue ink. Channels connecting heart to breath, breath to seed, seed to stars. The emperor is the bridge between heaven and earth. He says, his essence must flow unbroken. Our work ensures that flow. You can't help but whisper, "At what cost?" He chuckles softly. "At every cost. The universe does not give its secrets freely." Behind you, a young apprentice drops a vial. It shatters, releasing a puff of blue smoke that curls like a living thing. The master doesn't even turn his head. Another reminder. He mutters, "That perfection is both pursuit and punishment." You step back toward the door, the heat from the cauldrons warming your skin. In the corner, you notice a small altar, a bowl of rice, a few coins, and a stick of incense burning sideways. For protection, the alchemist says when he sees you looking, "We pray to the spirits of those who tested these potions before the emperor does." You blink. "You mean?" "Yes," he interrupts gently. "Not every experiment succeeds." For a moment, the only sound is the bubbling of mercury and the slow drip of condensation. You realize that every glowing vial here is both miracle and memorial. The pursuit of power doesn't just consume emperors, it devours those who serve them. As you step back into the corridor, the alchemist calls after you. "Remember," he says, his voice echoing like a prophecy, "to balance life and desire is to sip from the same cup that kills you." The door closes behind you with a hiss. The corridor feels colder now. The palace quieter. You can still taste metal on your tongue. Somewhere far away, a nightingale sings, a fragile, ordinary sound in a world obsessed with eternity. You pause, touching the wall to steady yourself. It feels alive, vibrating faintly, as if the palace itself remembers every drop of potion, every whispered promise of immortality. And as you walk away, you think about that golden liquid, shimmering with both beauty and danger, like desire itself. Irresistible yet lethal. The eunuchs will deliver the vial to the emperor soon. He'll drink it before dawn, trusting it to strengthen his spirit. The empire will sleep easier, believing heaven's balance has been restored. But you know better. You've seen what burns beneath the gold. And tonight, for the first time, you wonder if the quest for eternal pleasure is really just another name for slow, exquisite self-destruction. You follow the echo of your own footsteps until the air warms again, soft, perfumed, almost too still. The corridor opens into a vast circular chamber glowing with amber light. A single golden lantern swings gently overhead, scattering shifting reflections across the floor of polished jade. This is the Emperor's longevity chamber. A place half bedroom, half laboratory, built for one purpose: to preserve vitality at any cost. It's not what you expected. You thought it might be lavish, even obscene, but instead, it's unnervingly clinical. Everything here is measured. The bed is perfectly centered beneath a domed ceiling painted with constellations. Each corner holds an incense burner carved with dragons, positioned precisely to mirror the flow of qi through the body. There's symmetry in everything: the sheets, the cushions, even the placement of the candles. Desire, here, has geometry. You step closer. The bed itself is low and wide, draped in layers of pale silk. The fabric shimmers like water. Around it, small tables hold the tools of the Emperor's nightly routine: jade bottles, brushes, and scrolls of breathing techniques written in looping calligraphy. One scroll reads, "Breathe in from the earth. Exhale toward the heavens. Preserve the golden essence. Do not scatter the pearl." You stare at it, suppressing a nervous laugh. The ancients had a poetic way of describing things modern medicine would just call blood pressure. You hear a faint sound, a door sliding open behind you. A eunuch enters, carrying a bronze tray. On it lies the vial of golden elixir you saw earlier, along with a tiny porcelain spoon. The man bows, places it on the table beside the bed, and leaves without a word. His silence feels rehearsed, sacred. For a moment, you imagine the Emperor standing here, alone, exhausted, staring at the ceiling painted with stars. Maybe he wonders if the potion will help this time. Maybe he wonders how many of his ancestors felt the same mix of dread and hope before swallowing their next miracle. You touch the porcelain spoon. It's cool, delicate, almost fragile. Then your gaze drifts to the mirror across the room, an enormous sheet of polished bronze framed in gold. It reflects the bed, the lantern, and you, but the reflection trembles slightly. Distorted by heat, you wonder if that's how the Emperor sees himself these days: blurred, flickering, more myth than man. On the far wall hangs a curtain embroidered with silver cranes flying in endless circles. You brush it aside and find another chamber beyond, a smaller room filled with cushions, musical instruments, and soft silk draperies. The air smells faintly of jasmine. This is where the Emperor and his chosen companion meet before the main ritual. The atmosphere here is different, not sacred, not exactly sensual either, but somewhere in between. You notice the lighting: only 3 lanterns, placed low to cast gentle shadows. The idea was simple: too much brightness scattered the spirit. Too much darkness invited demons. Balance, always balance. A faint rustle draws your attention. A young attendant enters, carrying a small wooden box. She opens it and reveals sticks of incense shaped like tiny lotus buds, made with ambergris and orchid. She whispers, as if speaking louder might offend the gods. It calms the breath and awakens the spirit. You nod, though you can't help thinking that any incense strong enough to awaken the spirit probably also caused lifelong sinus issues. When she leaves, silence returns. You wander to a low shelf stacked with books, strange, hybrid texts that blend medicine, astrology, and erotic philosophy. One is titled The Classic of Harmonious Union. You open it carefully. The illustrations are delicate, precise, showing couples entwined like mirrored calligraphy strokes. But the commentary is almost scientific. Which direction the head should face according to the lunar phase. How many breaths each partner should take. When to stop to preserve essence. It's bizarrely systematic, intimacy redesigned as an equation. You imagine the emperor reading this by lamplight, half believing that the right breath or posture might unlock eternal life. You can almost hear his voice. If I just follow the pattern perfectly, maybe heaven will notice. You move closer to the bed again. And for a moment, you feel something. An energy that hums just beneath the surface. This place is alive with ritual repetition. With the ghost of every night that came before. It's as if the chamber itself remembers. A soft bell chimes outside. The emperor's attendants will arrive soon to prepare him for rest, or what passes for rest when your body is a political instrument. You picture them adjusting his robes, reciting incantations, brushing his hair in slow, rhythmic motions. The ritual might last longer than the act itself. You look up at the painted constellations above. The stars have been arranged to mirror the heavens exactly as they appeared on the night the emperor ascended the throne. He sleeps each night beneath his own coronation, as though trying to relive the one moment he truly believed in eternity. A draft stirs the curtains, and the lantern flickers. For an instant, the shadows seem to move, like the room itself is breathing. You close your eyes and listen. The hum of the cauldrons from the alchemy lab. The soft shuffle of servants beyond the door. The faint heartbeat of an empire that measures its destiny by the rhythm of one man's pulse. And beneath it all, loneliness. Thick and invisible, like smoke that never clears. You think about that golden potion waiting on the tray. Shimmering with promise, you wonder how many nights it gave the emperor energy, and how many it quietly stole from his future. Because that's the cruelest trick of power. It always asks you to trade tomorrow for one more perfect night. You take one last look around the chamber, committing its symmetry to memory, the perfect alignment, the flawless geometry. The illusion of control. Then you whisper into the silence, barely loud enough for the stars to hear. Even perfection gets tired. The lantern flickers once more. Somewhere deep in the palace, a door opens, and the ritual begins again. The air grows warmer as you move beyond the longevity chamber, past a screen painted with cranes and clouds. Ahead lies a narrow doorway covered by curtains of pale jade beads that clink softly when you part them. The scent that greets you is delicate but unmistakable, jasmine mixed with something mineral. Almost electric, you step inside and realize you've entered a smaller, circular room filled with cushions and mirrored panels. This is the chamber of the breath of jade. A place where the emperor and his chosen companion practiced a ritual so secret it blurred the line between medicine and mysticism. In the center, a low dais is covered with white silk embroidered with faint green veins. Like leaves pressed into fabric, a single bronze brazier burns in the corner, releasing curls of pale smoke that drift lazily toward the ceiling. The smoke smells faintly of mint and iron, and it makes the air shimmer in front of you. Two figures kneel by the dais. The emperor and his companion face each other, their eyes half closed, breathing in slow, mirrored rhythm. No words pass between them. Each inhale seems to pull light into the body. Each exhale releases something invisible. Around them, eunuchs stand at a respectful distance, silent as statues. One of them holds a jade flute and blows a single note so low it's almost inaudible, more vibration than sound. You watch, transfixed. The emperor breathes in through his nose, deep and steady. The concubine mirrors him. Their movements are perfectly synchronized, like reflections in rippling water. Then, as if on cue, they both lean slightly forward until their foreheads nearly touch. The air between them glows faintly green, lit by the brazier's light refracted through a piece of jade placed carefully between them. This is how they shared energy, whispers a eunuch beside you, his voice barely audible. The breath of jade joins yin and yang without spilling the essence. He glances nervously at you, then adds, "It is said those who master it can live 100 years with unbroken spirit." You nod slowly, though part of you wants to laugh. Every generation has its wellness trend. You think, some chase kale smoothies. Others inhale each other's breath over heated jade. But you can feel the reverence in the air. This isn't parody to them, it's faith. As you watch, the rhythm quickens slightly. The emperor's face is calm but strained, as though he's balancing on the edge of exhaustion and clarity. A drop of sweat slips down his temple, glinting in the candlelight. The concubine's eyes flutter open for a moment. She looks at him not as a ruler, but as a man, frightened and fragile. It's the briefest flicker of humanity in a ritual designed to erase it. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ends. Both inhale deeply, then exhale in unison. The eunuch strikes a bell. The sound resonates through the room. Soft but final. The emperor leans back, eyes closed, his breathing shallow but peaceful. The concubine bows, lowering her head to the floor. The jade between them catches the dying light and fades from green to gray. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. The eunuchs step forward, moving with practiced grace. One wipes the emperor's hands with a damp silk cloth. Another replaces the incense with fresh sticks. Everything happens quietly, as if this sacred choreography has been performed 1,000 times before. One eunuch notices your curious expression and murmurs, "The breath connects life and heaven, but it must never be mixed too strongly, or the body will rebel." You raise an eyebrow. "Rebel how?" He looks around, as though the shadows might overhear. "There was once an emperor," he whispers, "who tried to extend the ritual for an entire night. By dawn, his lips were green, and his breath smelled of copper. They said he had drawn too much from heaven's well." You shiver, though the room is warm. The air feels heavy, thick with incense and secrecy. You realize that for all their talk of balance, these rituals dance dangerously close to the edge of obsession. The emperor isn't trying to live forever. He's trying to conquer mortality one breath at a time. As the attendants escort the concubine away, she glances once over her shoulder. Her eyes are calm but distant, like someone who's been taught that affection itself is a luxury. You wonder what she'll dream about tonight. Maybe not jade, or breath, or even the emperor, but wind, or open sky, or the sound of waves beyond these walls. You turn to leave, but before you step through the curtain, you notice a small jade bowl on the floor beside the dais. It's filled with clear water. Reflecting the lantern light, the surface ripples slightly, even though the air is still. For a second, you could swear the reflection looks back at you, not your face. But something older, quieter, watching. You blink, and it's gone, just water again. Outside, the corridor is darker than before. The beads of the curtain clink softly behind you as they fall back into place. The smoke of the incense lingers on your clothes. Cool and faintly metallic, you inhale once, exhale slowly, trying to match the rhythm you just witnessed. The air feels heavier leaving your lungs than entering. And you can't help but think, maybe that's the real secret of the breath of jade. Not immortality, not energy, just the reminder that even gods must learn how to breathe. You keep walking, the silence swells again, the lanterns flicker, and somewhere behind you, the emperor's sigh merges with the hum of the palace, a sound as old and endless as the empire itself. By the time you leave the pavilion of graceful movements, the sun has drifted westward, gilding the palace roofs with lazy light. The music fades behind you, replaced by the slow pulse of drums somewhere far off, deep. Methodical, like the empire's heartbeat, you follow it down a narrow hallway where the scent of wax and smoke grows stronger with every step. Soon, the corridor opens into a long rectangular chamber where hundreds of candles burn in perfect rows. Their flames sway faintly in the heat, throwing shadows that shiver like ghosts. This is the chamber of propitious flames, where the empire's fortune is read not by stars or dreams, but by fire. A court diviner stands at the far end, his hands folded inside long, ink-stained sleeves. His hair is white, his eyes milky with age but sharp with purpose. You watch as he moves slowly between the rows of candles, murmuring under his breath. Occasionally, he stops to adjust a wick or replace a flame, as if rearranging fate itself. When he notices you, he bows his head slightly. "Another seeker," he says, his voice low and rasped. "They always come when the light begins to dim." You step closer, careful not to disturb the alignment of candles. "What do you read from them?" He gestures toward the flickering sea of flames. "Each candle burns for one soul within these walls, emperor, consort, scholar, servant. The height of the flame tells me how steady their spirit is. When a candle falters, we know something has changed." You look down the rows. Thousands of tiny flames waver in silence. The air smells thick with melted wax and something faintly metallic. "And the emperor's flame?" you ask. The diviner's gaze lifts toward a tall, solitary candle placed at the center of the room. Its wax is pure white, the wick steady but burning lower than the others. His Majesty's flame burns constantly. The diviner says softly, but it leans. The smoke curls in strange directions. A sign of imbalance. You study the candle. "You mean, danger?" "Not danger," he replies, "but exhaustion. Even light tires when it's forced to shine too long." He moves closer, his fingers tracing invisible circles in the air above the flame. "We adjust the oils daily, dragon's blood resin, amber, and a drop of phoenix oil to keep it pure. But balance cannot be imposed forever. The emperor believes heaven's favor is eternal. The flame disagrees. The thought unsettles you. And if it goes out? The old man gives a thin smile. Then the empire will follow. You walk between the rows of candles, feeling the heat gather on your skin. Each one seems to breathe. Their light flickers like 1,000 restless hearts. Near the far wall, you notice something strange, a small table covered with extinguished candles. Each burned halfway down and carefully labeled with a strip of parchment. The diviner follows your gaze. Those belong to the forgotten, he says, concubines who vanished, ministers who fell from grace. Their flames are preserved for memory, not mercy. We relight them once a year, just long enough to remember that all glory ends in smoke. He bends over the table, selecting one candle with trembling fingers. The wax is pale yellow, streaked with ash. This one, he says, was hers. You don't have to ask who he means. You remember the camellia-scented concubine, the one who lingered in the emperor's perfume even after she was gone. She burned brightly, he murmurs, too brightly. Her light made others nervous. And when brightness offends power, darkness becomes convenient. He replaces the candle gently, almost lovingly. You feel the air shift. Somewhere near the emperor's great flame, a wick pops, sending a spark into the air before steadying again. The old man doesn't flinch. See, he says, even the strongest flame trembles when it remembers the wind. You walk back toward the center, staring into the great candle's steady glow. It feels alive, too alive. The heat on your face carries weight, the kind that presses rather than warms. Does he know you keep this? You ask quietly. The diviner smiles faintly. He knows. He just prefers not to visit. Most kings don't like to watch their souls burn in real time. You stand in silence for a moment. The room hums softly, each flame whispering in a language you almost understand. Then, from somewhere outside, a bell tolls, low, distant, solemn. The diviner straightens. Evening prayer, he says, the hour when light meets shadow. The emperor will soon dine. His candle must be trimmed to match his pulse. You glance back at him. You can do that? Of course, he says. In this palace, even time obeys symmetry. He lifts a long silver snuffer and lowers it delicately toward the emperor's flame, pinching it just enough to shorten its glow. The smoke rises in a slow, perfect spiral. The new flame that follows is smaller, steadier, almost reluctant. The old man sighs. There, he whispers. Better to burn quietly than to vanish suddenly. You turn toward the door. As you step into the cool corridor, you look back one last time. Thousands of candles flicker behind you, their flames swaying in unison as if bowing. And for a moment, you see the entire empire for what it truly is, not marble and silk. Not gods and glory, but fire, beautiful, controlled, terrified of its own extinction. The corridors grow quieter as twilight deepens. The heat of the day slips away, leaving the palace wrapped in cool silver light. Lanterns flicker on one by one, their glow soft but uncertain, like thoughts the night hasn't finished forming. You walk through the shadowed halls, past silk curtains and empty courtyards, until you hear a faint rhythmic tapping, metal against stone. The sound draws you toward an open archway where the scent of iron and pine resin fills the air. Inside, a small forge glows dimly. its coals pulsing like a sleeping heart. This is the workshop of celestial implements, where the tools of ritual, the bowls, bells, mirrors, and blades, are born. Only one man works here. His skin is the color of tarnished bronze. His arms thick with years of labor. He doesn't look up when you enter. Instead, he continues hammering a thin sheet of gold into shape, each strike measured and deliberate. Sparks leap in tiny arcs, fading before they touch the floor. You stand quietly, watching him work. After a moment, he speaks without looking at you. Everyone in this place tries to become eternal. I just make the objects they'll leave behind. His voice is deep but tired, like the echo of a bell that's rung too many times. You step closer. What are you making? He lifts the gold sheet carefully with tongs and sets it into a mold shaped like a crescent moon. A mirror, he says, for the emperor's nightly reflection. Every few years, he commissions a new one. He says the old ones grow clouded with too much truth. You almost smile. And does the new one show him better lies? He lets out a low chuckle, finally glancing your way. Sometimes, but gold remembers what it sees. No matter how many times it's melted, a trace remains. The reflections stay buried in the metal, like ghosts waiting for a reason to speak. He sets the mold aside and begins polishing another object, a small ceremonial blade etched with spiraling symbols. Its edge gleams faintly in the firelight. You nod toward it. That doesn't look like a tool for worship. It is, he says. They use it to cut strands of silk during purification rituals. The silk represents desire, attachment, grief. The emperor believes that each cut severs a burden. And do you believe that? He shrugs. Metal doesn't care what it's used for. It obeys the hand that holds it. That's both its strength and its curse. He pauses, turning the blade in the light. The reflection dances across his face, sharp and fleeting. Once, years ago, I forged something different, a pair of cuffs made from jade-threaded steel. They weren't for punishment, they were for protection. You tilt your head. Protection from what? He lowers his gaze. From himself. The words hang in the air, heavy and strange. He goes on quietly. When the emperor was young, he feared the nights when his mind raced faster than the stars. He said he could hear his blood roaring like thunder. He ordered me to make cuffs that could hold him still while he meditated, so his spirit wouldn't wander. He wore them for 3 years. You stare at him, uncertain whether to believe it. And did they work? The smith smiles faintly. They kept his body still. Yes, but not his thoughts. Some storms don't need movement to destroy. He sets the blade down, wipes his hands, and pours himself a cup of water from a clay jug. In this palace, he says, everything is built to contain something: lust, ambition, fear, the gods themselves. But you can't forge peace like metal. It melts as soon as you look away. You wander to a table covered with finished pieces: bells, goblets, tiny statuettes of dragons and phoenixes. Each one is flawless. Each one gleams with a beauty that feels slightly menacing, like perfection achieved at too high a cost. He watches you. When I was younger, he says, I used to mark my work with a hidden symbol. Just a single line beneath the base. My way of saying, a human made this. But when the inspectors found out, they made me stop. The emperor wanted divine objects. not human ones. You trace your finger along one of the mirrors. Its surface ripples faintly, warping your reflection into something unrecognizable. And now? You ask. Do you still sign them? He smiles, a slow, secret smile. Every one of them, he whispers, but not with a mark, with a flaw. You look closer and notice it, a tiny imperfection near the rim. Invisible unless the light hits just right. Why risk it? He meets your eyes, because gods may demand perfection, but only mortals leave proof they were real. For a long moment, neither of you speaks. The fire crackles softly, throwing gold light across the walls. The air smells of smoke and pine resin. And somewhere outside, a night bird calls once before vanishing into silence. Finally, he sets down his tools. Take this, he says, handing you a small, unfinished mirror. Its surface is dull, its edge rough. When you look into it, don't expect beauty, expect honesty. That's rarer. You turn it over in your hands. It feels warm, alive in its imperfection. As you leave, the smith returns to his work, hammering gold into shape once more. The sound follows you down the corridor, steady, deliberate, eternal. And you think, perhaps every artifact in this palace, every crown, every mirror, every blade, carries the same hidden flaw. Not a mistake, but a whisper from the hands that made it. A reminder that beneath the perfection, humanity still breathes. The echo of the blacksmith's hammer fades behind you, replaced by the distant hum of evening insects rising from the palace gardens. The air feels different now, thicker, slower, as though time itself has softened. You follow the faint trail of torchlight down a covered walkway that leads toward the southern wing, where laughter and music drift faintly through the trees. You've reached the pavilion of fragrant nights, the emperor's retreat for dreams and illusions. Unlike the solemn halls and incense-thick chambers you've passed, this place feels alive. Lush vines curl over the wooden beams. Paper lanterns sway gently above pools of lotus and koi. The air is perfumed with plum wine and night-blooming jasmine. You can almost forget this is a palace ruled by fear and ritual. Almost. A woman's voice breaks the quiet, soft, low, carrying a melancholy tune. You follow the sound to a terrace overlooking the garden. There, seated beside a curved zither, is one of the emperor's musicians. Her robe is indigo, her hair pinned with silver feathers that catch the lantern light. She plays with her eyes closed, fingers gliding across the strings like wind brushing water. When she notices you, she stops playing and opens her eyes. You shouldn't be here, she says gently, though she doesn't sound angry. You smile faintly. No one ever says that until it's too late. She studies you for a moment, then gestures to the seat across from her. Sit, then. You've already ruined my solitude. You sit. The zither rests between you, its strings still trembling faintly. That song, you say, I've never heard it before. It isn't meant to be heard. She replies. It's a song I play when I want to remember who I was before I learned to bow. The answer catches you off guard. Does the emperor ever ask for it? She shakes her head. He only asks for songs that make him forget. This one does the opposite. The night deepens. The cicadas grow louder, and the lanterns flicker in the soft wind. You can smell the faint sweetness of the wine beside her, a small half-empty cup placed next to the instrument. Tell me, she says after a moment, her tone curious but cautious. What does the world outside these walls sound like now? You think for a moment. Messy, you say, loud, imperfect, but real. She smiles, though her eyes remain distant. Then it hasn't changed. She plucks one note, clear, fragile, perfect. Here, perfection is a kind of silence. Even the wrong note must sound intentional. But the emperor likes that. He says music should sound the way heaven breathes. You glance toward the garden, where faint silhouettes move among the trees, attendants lighting more lanterns. And what do you think? She runs her fingers across the strings again, producing a soft sigh of sound. I think heaven is tone deaf. You can't help laughing quietly. That might be treason. She smiles. Then let me be the empire's softest rebel. For a while, she plays without speaking. The melody changes, slow and wistful, as though she's weaving thoughts she can't say aloud. Her hands are delicate but sure, each motion both prayer and defiance. When the song ends, she says softly, "Do you know what this pavilion was built for? Not for pleasure. Not really. It was meant for listening." The emperor once believed that if he heard the right combination of notes, he would hear the voice of heaven itself. You tilt your head. And did he? She smiles sadly. He heard himself. That's close enough to madness. Her gaze drifts toward the lotus pond below. Sometimes I think we all live in an orchestra that's forgotten its playing. The courtiers, the scholars, the concubines, we keep repeating our parts because we fear what silence would sound like. You study her for a long moment. You could leave, you say quietly. There must be a way. She laughs softly, not unkindly. Leave? Where would I go? Every sound outside these walls would remind me I was once an echo. She lifts her zither again, pressing her palm to the strings. But I do have a small rebellion. You lean forward. What kind? When I play for him, she says, I change one note, just one, so faint no one notices. But I know. It's the only proof I exist outside the perfection he demands. You sit in silence, hearing the faint splash of fish in the pond below. A single lantern drifts free from its string and floats upward, rising into the night like a tiny, glowing secret. You ask softly, does he ever notice? Her eyes glimmer in the lantern light. Perhaps. But he pretends not to. And so do I. The wind moves again, stirring the curtains. The song she played lingers in the air like perfume, sweet, sad, impossible to forget. You rise to leave, but she stops you with one last question. Tell me, she says, when you write this story, will you remember my name? You hesitate. You haven't told me it. She smiles, the faintest, most fragile smile. Good, then maybe I'll stay free a little longer. You bow slightly, and she nods, returning to her instrument. As you walk away, her fingers find the strings again. The melody follows you through the night, soft, imperfect, human. And you think, in a world built on control, maybe freedom doesn't roar or shatter chains. Maybe it sounds like a single wrong note played beautifully on purpose. By the time you leave the pavilion of fragrant nights, the moon has risen high, round, enormous, its light spilling over the rooftops like milk over black lacquer. The palace seems quieter than ever. Only the faint rustle of silk and the occasional call of a night bird disturb the stillness. The scent of jasmine follows you until it's replaced by something cooler, stone, water, and the faint musk of lilies. You find yourself drawn toward the Imperial Garden of Reflection, a place the emperor visits only when he wishes to be alone, or when he wants others to think he is. The garden is vast, open to the sky. A single pond dominates its center. Mirror still beneath the moonlight. White lotus flowers float across its surface, their petals luminous in the dark. A thin path of stepping stones crosses the water toward a small island where a pavilion stands. Its roof gleams faintly with gold tiles, but the rest is shrouded in shadow. You walk carefully across the stones, each step echoing in the silence. The air is cool and fragrant, the kind of quiet that seems to listen. When you reach the island, you find the emperor already there. He's seated on a low bench beside the pond, his robe unadorned, plain white silk, simple as moonlight. His hair is unbound, falling loosely across his shoulders. He doesn't turn when he speaks. You walk softly, he says. Most people forget how. You bow slightly. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to intrude. He waves a hand dismissively. No one intrudes here. That's the point of a garden. No one belongs. And everything pretends otherwise. His tone isn't cruel, just tired. You hesitate, unsure whether to speak. The emperor reaches down and picks a lotus blossom from the water. Holding it by the stem, "Do you know," he says, "these flowers bloom from mud? They rise through filth to open under heaven's gaze. Every year, the monks say they are a lesson in purity." He turns the flower in his hand, watching the petals shift in the light. "But I think they're liars. They don't rise from filth, they feed on it. Beauty is never clean. It survives by pretending to be." He drops the flower into the water. Ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of the moon. You study him quietly, without his crown and ceremony. He seems almost human, just another man weighed down by thoughts too heavy to speak aloud. "Does Your Majesty come here often?" you ask softly. "When the palace grows too loud," he says, "and yet even here, it follows me." He gestures toward the water. "Look, even the moon insists on watching." You follow his gaze. The reflection trembles faintly with the ripples. "Maybe it watches because it's lonely," you suggest. He laughs, a small, genuine sound that vanishes as quickly as it came. "Lonely," he repeats. That's a word they never use for emperors. They say I'm surrounded by devotion. But devotion is just loneliness wearing expensive perfume. You sit beside him, a respectful distance away. "You don't believe in devotion?" "I believe in habits," he says. "The court loves me because they were raised to. The concubines adore me because they're told it's divine to do so. The eunuchs serve me because they have no one else to serve. Everyone here acts as if heaven is watching, when really it's just me, and I'm no god." He leans back, eyes half closed. "They call me the son of heaven. But tell me, what father demands his child never sleep, never falter, never want?" The question hangs between you. The pond is so still again that you can hear the faint plop of a fish beneath the surface. "Do you ever wish you weren't emperor?" you ask. He considers. "Sometimes," he says, "but I wouldn't know how to be anything else." Power is a kind of disease, it rewires the soul. Even if I left, I'd still hear the palace breathing in my head. He pauses, then adds softly, when I was a boy, I used to imagine the world beyond these walls. I thought people lived without fear there. That they could laugh too loudly, love too carelessly. Now I know the truth. They fear too, but at least their fear belongs to them. The emperor reaches for another lotus, hesitates, then lets his hand fall. I envy them, he murmurs, not for their freedom, but for their ignorance. They still believe life is something they can shape. You study his reflection in the water, the lines of his face distorted by ripples. Maybe it can be shaped. You say quietly, just not perfectly. He turns his head toward you, his eyes catching the moonlight. For a moment, he almost smiles. Imperfection, he says. Now there's a word my ancestors would have executed you for. He looks back at the pond. But you're right, maybe perfection was the first lie we ever told ourselves. A way to pretend control over what we can't understand. The breeze stirs, rippling the pond again. The moon's reflection breaks apart and reforms, never the same, never destroyed. The emperor rises slowly, his robe whispering against the stones. Tomorrow, he says, I'll wake to more rituals, more silence. But tonight, he glances upward. Tonight I'll let heaven think I've forgotten my role. He begins to walk away along the stepping stones, his figure reflected faintly in the shifting water. Then he stops and looks back. Tell me, observer, he says, if the Son of Heaven wishes, just once, to be the son of no one, would heaven forgive him? You meet his gaze. Heaven forgets faster than it forgives. He nods, as if that were the answer he expected. Then he turns and disappears into the shadows of the corridor beyond. You remain on the island, watching the lotus drift slowly across the pond. The water reflects the moon again, whole and serene, as if nothing had disturbed it. And you think, perhaps the emperor doesn't envy mortals for their freedom or ignorance. Perhaps he envies them simply because when they look into water, they see themselves, and not the weight of a world staring back. The emperor's footsteps fade into the distance, swallowed by the hush of the garden. You remain on the island a while longer, listening to the wind slide through the reeds. The moonlight pools like spilled silver across the stones. And somewhere a night heron cries, a short, lonely sound that vanishes almost as soon as it begins. You rise and retrace your steps across the pond, the water glimmering around each stone as if reluctant to let you go. By the time you reach the other side, the palace feels different again, emptier, yet more alive, like it's exhaling after holding its breath all night. You wander without purpose, following corridors that twist and turn until you find yourself in a place you don't recognize. The walls are bare here, the tiles worn smooth by countless feet. You realize you've entered the Hall of Archives, where history itself is imprisoned. Inside, rows of shelves stretch into the shadows, heavy with bamboo scrolls, ledgers, and silk manuscripts. Dust floats in the lamplight like lazy ghosts. The smell of ink and mildew fills the air. A single scribe sits at a low table, brush poised over parchment. His hair is thin, his back slightly bent, but his movements are precise, ritualistic. He looks up when you approach, eyes narrowing as if adjusting to something unfamiliar. You're not a minister, he says quietly. You walk like someone who still wonders. I've been doing a lot of that lately. You admit. What are you writing? He dips his brush in ink. Corrections. He says. The past is never perfect the first time. You glance at the shelves. All of this, is it the Empire's record? Not exactly. He gestures toward a set of scrolls tied with red string. Those are the official histories, names, victories, decrees, births, deaths. But over there, he nods toward a darker corner, are the revisions, the parts that were too true to survive. You step closer. The scrolls there are older. The silk yellowed and cracking. Some are sealed with black wax, others have no markings at all. The scribe watches you carefully. Every emperor believes he can command how history remembers him. He says, but memory is treacherous. It obeys the ink, not the crown. You touch one of the sealed scrolls. And what happens to the truths you erase? They remain here, he says simply, silent, waiting for someone foolish enough to open them. You glance at him, and has anyone? Once, he says, his voice dropping lower, a young scholar during the reign of the last dynasty. He broke a seal and read what was hidden. By morning, he had written a letter confessing his delusion, that he had seen words that could not exist. They buried him with the scroll. He returns to his work, brush gliding softly across the parchment. That's what the Empire does best. It turns knowledge into myth and myth into obedience. You walk slowly between the shelves, running your hand over the rough edges of bamboo slips. The air feels heavier here, as if time itself resists being disturbed. On one table lies a fragment of silk with faded calligraphy. You lean closer and read the words. Heaven's son fears not death, but memory. The scribe's voice drifts toward you again. When I was young, he says, I thought recording history was sacred. Now I see it's just another form of storytelling. We remove what embarrasses heaven and call it order. We keep the rest and call it truth. You turn toward him, then why keep writing? He smiles faintly, dipping his brush again, because even lies deserve a record of their craftsmanship. You watch him for a long moment. The only sound is the scratch of his brush, the quiet heartbeat of revision. Finally, he says softly, there is a saying among the scribes. A dynasty dies twice, first when it falls, and again when its truth is rewritten. I wonder which death hurts more. He places the brush aside and stretches his cramped fingers. Do you know what the emperor asked me last week? He wanted to know if his reign will be remembered as divine. I told him the truth. That depends on who writes it. He gives a thin smile. He didn't like that answer. You can't help but smile back. So what did he do? Nothing, he says. That's how I know he believed me. The lamp beside him flickers, throwing long shadows across the scrolls. He looks down at his work again, eyes softening. Every dynasty fears silence. He murmurs, so we fill it with words, hoping to drown the things we can't face. You look around at the endless shelves, the sheer weight of words pressed into this place. And what about you? You ask. What will you write when no one's watching? He pauses, then answers quietly, that I was here, that I saw, that I remembered. You nod, and maybe that's enough. You turn to leave, your footsteps echoing through the hall. The scribe doesn't look up again, his brush already moving, rewriting the empire one careful stroke at a time. Outside, The night air greets you like an old friend. The wind has shifted, cooler now, carrying the faint promise of dawn. You glance back toward the Hall of Archives, its windows glowing faintly gold. And you think, in a palace built to outlive memory, perhaps the only true rebellion left is to remember honestly, even if the truth must live in the dark. The night deepens. The lamps along the palace walkways flicker like distant stars, their flames bending with each faint breeze. You walk without direction now, following instinct more than memory. The quiet has a rhythm to it, steady, deliberate, like the slow pulse of the empire itself. After a while, you hear a faint metallic ring, repeated and measured. You follow the sound down a narrow stone path that leads to an enclosed courtyard. At first, it looks empty. Then, as your eyes adjust, you see a row of armored figures standing beneath the eaves, motionless, ghost-like in the moonlight. But they aren't statues. They're guards, members of the Silent Watch, the Emperor's most loyal sentinels. Their armor gleams faintly, though dulled with use, and their faces are hidden behind masks shaped like animal spirits, tigers, cranes, wolves. You've seen guards throughout the palace, but these ones feel different. They don't watch with the suspicion of soldiers, they stand with the patience of stone. In the center of the courtyard, an older officer kneels, polishing his sword. His movements are slow, almost meditative. When he notices you, he doesn't reach for his weapon. Instead, he wipes the blade once more and says quietly, "If you've come to pray, you're late. The gods here have all gone deaf." You smile faintly. "Then maybe I came to listen instead." He glances up, eyes sharp even in shadow. "Listening is dangerous in this place. Silence is safer." You step closer. "You've been here long?" He nods once. 33 years. I've seen 4 emperors. Buried 2. He sets the sword aside. "We're not chosen for loyalty. You know, loyalty fades. We're chosen for stillness." The Emperor says a motionless guard reflects a motionless heart. You study the other sentinels. They're unmoving figures lined up beneath the eaves like dark pillars. "And do you believe that?" He gives a small, humorless smile. "No, but I've learned to pretend I do. In this palace, stillness keeps you alive." You crouch beside him, the stone cold beneath your knees. "You polish your blade even at night?" "Every night," he replies. "Steel dulls faster when it's unused. Same with faith." He lifts the sword slightly, tilting it toward the moonlight. "They tell us our weapons exist only for ceremony now. But sometimes I wonder which is sharper, the blade, or the lies we tell ourselves about why we carry it." He looks toward the other guards. "You see them? They were boys when they came here, trained to stand so still that the wind forgets to move around them. Some haven't spoken in years. The Emperor says silence purifies devotion. I say it erases it." You can feel the weight of his words. You sound like a man who remembers what sound used to mean. He chuckles softly. "Once, a long time ago, I sang in the northern barracks. Folk songs. Nothing sacred, just tunes to pass the hours. Then one night, I hummed to myself on patrol. The sound echoed down the corridor and startled His Majesty's hound. The next morning, the captain ordered me never to make noise again." You pause. "And you obeyed?" He looks at you. "Of course. But every night since, I hum in my head. Quietly. so quietly not even the gods can hear. A gust of wind passes through the courtyard, rustling the banners overhead. The masks of the guards seem to turn slightly in the shifting light, their shadows long and strange. You ask, "Do you ever think about leaving?" His voice is steady. Leaving isn't forbidden, it's just forgotten. After enough years, you stop imagining where the door might lead. He gestures toward the palace beyond. That's how power works. It doesn't cage your body. It convinces your soul the outside isn't worth it. He rises to his feet, sliding the sword back into its sheath. The motion is fluid, practiced, a ritual rather than an act. Still, he says, I stay, not for loyalty, not for fear, but because someone must remember how to hold the line. He steps forward, and you notice a faint tremor in his hands. He catches your glance and smiles. Age, he says, even statues crack eventually. You look toward the other guards again. Their stillness is almost eerie now, the moonlight carving their armor into shapes that seem both human and divine. Do they sleep? You ask quietly. Once every 3 days, he replies. The rest of the time, they stand. The emperor believes the night is safest when watched by the sleepless. You consider that. That sounds less like protection and more like penance. He laughs softly. In this empire, the two are often the same. He walks toward a stone basin at the edge of the courtyard, washing his hands in cold water. The moon reflects on the surface, breaking into silver shards as his fingers move. We all carry mirrors, he says, but ours are made of metal, not glass. We polish them not to see ourselves, but to forget what we look like. You realize now that the stillness here isn't peace, it's endurance. These men are monuments carved out of fear and duty, preserved by repetition. As you turn to leave, the old officer speaks again. If you write about us, he says, don't call us loyal, call us quiet. That's the truest thing left. You nod, and if the emperor asked what you protect, he smiles faintly, his eyes reflecting the moon. Not him, not really. We protect the idea that he still needs protecting. You bow slightly and step back into the corridor. The rhythmic sound of metal resumes behind you, steel against stone, echoing through the night like the faint heartbeat of a forgotten god. And you think, perhaps silence is the empire's most perfect invention, because it looks like peace, sounds like devotion, and hides everything that's dying beneath it. You leave the courtyard of the silent watch with the sound of steel still echoing in your mind, a rhythm too precise to be human, too heavy to forget. The corridor opens into the palace's outer gardens, where the scent of rain-soaked earth mingles with the faint sweetness of osmanthus blossoms. The sky is pale now, not quite night, not yet dawn, that uncertain hour when even the empire seems to hold its breath. You follow a narrow path lined with bamboo until you reach a small gate. Beyond it lies the chamber of restored dreams, a place whispered about by the servants, where the emperor's sleep is guarded. Not by soldiers, but by medicine and myth. You push the gate open gently. Inside, the world is bathed in amber light. The air smells of sandalwood and lotus resin, thick enough to make your lungs slow down. The room is wide but intimate, its walls painted with soft murals of clouds and cranes, symbols of transcendence. At the far end, you see him again, the emperor, reclining on a couch of woven silk. His face is pale, his expression unreadable. Around him stand 3 attendants, one fanning the air with peacock feathers, another grinding powder into a porcelain bowl, and the last preparing a thin golden needle between her fingers. You recognize the physician you met before, the same man who once spoke of elixirs that tasted of obedience. He glances at you briefly but says nothing. His attention is fixed on the emperor's pulse, which he measures with trembling precision. Too fast, he murmurs. The heart runs ahead of the soul again. The emperor opens one eye. Then tell it to wait. The physician bows. Heaven does not negotiate, Your Majesty, but we can persuade it to slow. He signals the attendant with the needle. She steps forward and kneels beside the couch. Her hands steady, her eyes blank with practiced calm. She slides the golden needle into the emperor's wrist with exquisite care. His fingers twitch once, then still. You feel the tension in the air shift, something between serenity and surrender. The physician turns to the bowl of powder. This is the dream mixture. He explains softly, perhaps to himself. Deer antler for strength, chrysanthemum for calm, powdered pearl for clarity, and, he hesitates, a fragment of jade to bind the spirit. He mixes it into a liquid that glows faintly under the lamplight. Then hands the bowl to the emperor. Drink slowly, Your Majesty. The jade remembers. The emperor takes the bowl, studying the reflection of his own face in the surface. And if I don't drink? He asks. The physician lowers his head. Then heaven will send dreams without permission. The emperor smiles faintly. Heaven already does, but he drinks anyway. You watch as the mixture takes effect, slowly. Like ink bleeding into silk. His breathing steadies, his eyelids lower, his body softens. The attendants step back in unison. The physician whispers. He drifts now between realms. Do not speak too loudly. Words can catch in the dream. You glance at the emperor. His lips move faintly, fragments of sentences you can't quite catch. Something about rivers, about light, about a door he cannot find. The physician watches closely, then murmurs. He dreams of the flood again. It returns every season. The flood? You whisper. He nods. A story passed down through the dynasty. The first emperor dreamt it too. A vast wave swallowing his palace. Some say it was a warning. Others say it was memory. You study the emperor's face. Pale beneath the golden light. Do you believe it's a curse? The physician's gaze flickers. Everything that repeats becomes a curse eventually. He adjusts the incense burner, letting the smoke drift closer to the emperor's head. When he wakes, he will remember nothing, but the body always remembers what the mind forgets. That is why he cannot rest. His dreams are heavier than his crown. He sighs and turns to you. When he was a boy, he slept easily. He used to say dreams were the only place he could be human. Now, even there, he must play emperor. You watch the emperor's fingers twitch again, not in pain, but in something that looks like reaching. His lips form one clear word this time. Mother. The physician looks away. He calls for her every night. The Empress Mother's tomb lies beneath the western hills. He hasn't visited in a decade. You ask softly, why not? He says the dead should not see what the living have become. The physician extinguishes one of the lamps. lowering the light to a dim glow. "Do you see that?" he asks, pointing to the emperor's face. A single tear slips from the corner of his eye, vanishing into the silk beneath him. "Even jade cracks," he murmurs, "no matter how polished." For a long while, neither of you speaks. The attendants stand motionless. The only sound is the faint whisper of the fan and the slow rhythm of breathing, one man asleep, one man watching, and one man witnessing. Finally, the physician says quietly, "When he wakes, he will smile, he will laugh, he will command, the world will bow again. But in this hour, he belongs to no one, not even heaven." You look at the emperor, his chest rising and falling like the tide. You think of all the rituals, the dances, the prayers, the silences, all the ways this palace teaches people to forget their flesh and breath. And you realize that for the first time tonight, he looks peaceful not because of the empire's perfection, but because of its absence. The physician adjusts the needle, checks the pulse again, and nods. He sleeps. "Go now," he says softly. "Dreams are fragile things. Even watching can break them." You step back toward the door. The air outside feels cooler, freer. The first faint hint of dawn brushes the horizon, and the stars above the palace begin to fade. As you close the gate behind you, you glance back one last time. Through the carved screen, you see the emperor lying still beneath the golden lamplight, his crown resting beside him, forgotten, just for a moment. And you think, perhaps the greatest mercy left to any ruler is the chance to be human in his dreams. Even if he must wake to forget. The sky is soft gray now, the kind that barely separates night from morning. You walk through the outer courtyards as the first sounds of waking servants stir behind the walls, footsteps, whispers, the clatter of bronze bowls. The palace is coming alive again, rehearsing the same performance it has perfected for centuries. But you don't stop to watch. Something draws you beyond the main halls, past the familiar courtyards and incense corridors, toward a quiet hill behind the eastern wall. The mist gathers there like unspoken breath, and at its summit stands the Garden of Returning Light, the smallest, loneliest place in the entire Imperial complex. You've never been here before. Few have. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than an old resting garden, a small stone path winding between cypress trees, a weathered bench half covered with moss, a pond choked with reeds. But at the garden's center stands a single white tree, ancient, twisted, its bark glowing faintly where the morning light touches it. A lone monk tends to the roots, sweeping away fallen petals with a bamboo broom. His movements are slow, deliberate, like a man performing a ritual for an audience that no longer exists. When he sees you, he pauses, leaning on his broom. "You've come far," he says quietly. "I didn't mean to," you reply. "The palace led me here." He smiles. It has a way of doing that, especially to those who notice its silence. You step closer, studying the white tree. "What kind of tree is it?" "An old one," he says simply. "It was planted by the first emperor's gardener. The roots feed on the ashes of burned offerings. The branches bloom only at dawn, when night and day are equal, neither truth nor lie." You look up. The petals do shimmer strangely in the dim light, pale gold on one side, silver on the other, as if the tree can't decide what it wants to be. What do you call this place, you ask. The Garden of Returning Light. He answers. This is where the emperor comes when he wishes to remember. Remember what? The monk lowers his gaze. That he is temporary. He sets the broom aside and walks toward the pond. Every emperor before him has stood here. They look into this water and see what's left of their reflection. Some see peace. Most see fear. You glance at the pond, still and dark. The surface broken only by drifting petals. And you? You ask. What do you see? He chuckles softly. I see the same thing every morning. The sky pretending not to care. You sit on the bench. The moss cool beneath your palms. You've been here long? Long enough to learn that power ages faster than flesh. He says, each emperor believes he is different. Each one builds new rituals, new palaces, new words for the same hunger. And each one ends here, tired, asking if heaven still listens. You look toward the palace roofs glinting faintly through the mist. Does it? The monk smiles faintly. Heaven listens to everything. It just rarely answers. For a while, the two of you sit in silence. The mist thins. Birds begin to call from the trees. Somewhere below, the palace bells start to ring, signaling another day. The monk says softly, "Do you know what I think the strangest thing about emperors is? They spend their whole lives trying to be remembered. Yet when the next one rises, their names become prayers no one truly believes in." He plucks a fallen petal from the ground and tosses it into the pond. It drifts for a moment, then sinks without a trace. Even flowers know when to let go. He murmurs. You study the white tree again, its roots curling through stone. Its branches reaching for a sky that never truly brightens. And the emperor, you say quietly, does he still come here? He used to, the monk says. Now he sends me instead. Says he no longer needs reminders of impermanence. He pauses. That's how I know he needs them most. The bells below fall silent again, replaced by the faint sound of wind moving through the cypress leaves. The monk gathers his broom, ready to continue sweeping. The sun will rise soon. He says, when it does, the petals will close. The tree hides its beauty from daylight. Perhaps it knows the world doesn't deserve it. You stand, feeling the damp grass beneath your feet. The palace in the distance glows gold now. Washed in sunlight, it looks eternal again, untouchable. Perfect, but you know better. You've seen its cracks, its ghosts, its humanity buried beneath the rituals. You look back one last time at the monk, at the tree, at the quiet pond where reflection and reality finally meet. What happens when the emperor dies, you ask? He keeps sweeping, his voice calm. The next one arrives, convinced he can do better. And the tree blooms again, pretending it hasn't seen it all before. You take a deep breath. The morning air feels heavy, but also clean. As you walk away, the sound of his broom fades behind you, replaced by the calls of waking birds. When you reach the edge of the garden, the sunlight spills over the walls, washing the mist in gold. You stop and glance back once more. The monk has vanished. Only the white tree remains, its petals glowing softly in the dawn, the last witness to everything. The palace stands beyond, bright and silent, its 1,000 windows glittering like unblinking eyes. You imagine the emperor waking now, stretching into the same loneliness he left behind in his dreams. The servants will bow, The rituals will resume. The empire will breathe in perfect rhythm once more. And yet, somewhere deep within those golden walls, a man will remember the quiet pond, the drifting lotus, the single tear he shed in his sleep. The sound of the bells begins again, slower this time, softer, as if even they are tired of announcing eternity. You close your eyes and let the warmth of the rising sun rest against your face. The story fades here, gently. Without conclusion, the emperor still dreams, the scribes still write, the whispers still move through the corridors. Nothing truly ends in this palace. It only sleeps. And as the light fills the horizon, your voice falls to a whisper. Rest now, emperor of a sleepless empire. The dawn forgives what the night could not. End of script. Sweet dreams.